Yeah, actually, that was a. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah.
All right, we're going to devote most of the class to listening to your pitches and having Adam Smith is here in a moment, who I'll turn it over to. And Chris and Ari are going to help moderate the class too. And I'm going to try to stay out of the way and just heckle comments from the side. I do want to say a word or two. First of all, it should be obvious from looking around the room that most of your colleagues have split early for spring break or are enjoying the fact that it's 60 degrees outside. So we have to devise a quiz that you guys will all ace, which will be worth like 20% of your grade. So some questions that you'll have to answer in the survey, which will get you a lot of points. So think about that and come up with some suggestions. Maybe I'll ask Adam to run a discussion about that. Some puzzle that we can give you here, which isn't that hard to solve, but you'll have to solve in the survey.
How about getting this to work?
Getting that to work, yeah, that would be fun. Well, you have a few dominoes there too. Something right about that.
Well, I think it's a easy idea.
And you did detect displays.
Yeah, it's not doing. I've never done like a guys. Oh, maybe I can lower the resolution.
Let me. I just done these lectures. I think that will. So something else, speaking of the surveys, as you prepare to answer the surveys about Georgia, who was here on Tuesday, so that was an interesting situation that I didn't want to embarrass him about by saying anything while he was here, but it was pretty obvious he was not an accomplished public speaker. Many of you know that we had Paul English scheduled to come, who's a fantastic speaker who I've heard many times. And Paul canceled at the last minute and said, I got this fantastic guy I want to send instead. He's my top guy. You'll really love him. And Paul's an old friend, and I didn't want to be rude to Paul. I've never met him. Typically, I don't bring people in here unless I've heard them speak. York Jones came in. And as you know, a lot of it, unfortunately, his English wasn't great. It was hard to hear in the back of the room. I thought he was a really interesting guy. And there are a couple of things I want you to think about as you reflect on the survey, if you haven't already written it. One is, if you can interview with someone, how important is charisma for you or presentability in a room? Like, everybody's got skills. Obviously, this guy's skills weren't public speaking. But how effective a contributor does that make him, and how can you make good use out of someone like that in your organization? And how can you, as students, make the most out of someone who may not be the most exciting and entertaining person in front of the classroom, who's still obviously a very accomplished and intelligent person? I previewed one or two of the surveys, and one of you really admired how much he knows about his company, which is clear that he does. And if you read his bio, the guy's an amazingly accomplished mathematician. But something up is he wasn't translating well in the room, or he hadn't prepared his presentation. But that's okay. I want you to be able to punt and roll this stuff and get the most out of any situation. So take that as a challenge. So resist the urge to just say, well, I couldn't hear him in the back of the room, or he wasn't a dynamic speaker. We'll stipulate that. We all understand how it is. What else did you get out of him, or what else can you say about him that might be an interesting learning experience from that? And it's also an illustration that we're making this up as we go to some extent, and that we're experimenting with new people. So how do you do with the projector?
I don't know. It's not working.
Oh, do you have an adapter, or do you need one?
He's got a double adapter. Do you have one adapter that would work?
I have one adapter.
Do you want to send me a file and have it be projected from my computer? What do you think?
Oh, let's do that, actually. Yeah, so why don't you do that? And we won't be able to do video with Gerald when we call him, but that's okay. No, that's okay. And then I won't use my slides, I'll just talk. I didn't really put together an elaborate set of slides for this particular talk. I'm just going to reuse. Oh, hello. Cool. Awesome. Can you pass these out?
Sure. And
Oh, okay. I have one.
okay.
I think it's Kibosh, so it's fine.
Cool.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Adam Smith. Thank you to those who are wearing green. Just to support the spirit. This is a shirt. It's a Meraki shirt. Meraki is an MIT company. It was actually started by a bunch of PhDs out of CSAIL in 2006, I think, 2005, 2006. They had this project called RoofNet, which was like mesh Wi-Fi networking. And hey guys, can you come to the front? Don't worry about bothering us. Just get one kind of close together. Anyways, they're doing awesome. They basically stumbled around for a while, trying to basically create mesh Wi-Fi networks for the world. It's a hard problem because there's a critical mass problem. We're trying to get boil the ocean into it. So that basically didn't work out, but then they pivoted, and now they're selling enterprise Wi-Fi equipment and routers and so forth. It's like all simply managed in the cloud, which is awesome. So they're like 80-person company now. They're hoping to have like 100 people next year. So up here exporting their colors. So my name is Adam Smith. I came to MIT. Came in with the class of 2007. Did computer science here. I've always been interested in startups and software and everything like that. And so after I left MIT, basically I did a program called Y Combinator, which is something that you're probably familiar with. And I started a company called Sabi, which is where inbox spelled backwards. And so that was in 2006. I graduated a little bit early. And so from 2006 through 2010, I was working at Sabi. In 2010, I left my full-time job there. I took basically a year off. And right now I'm in the middle of basically starting my next company. So I'm like a month and a half into my kind of company 2.0. So in terms of structure, I haven't really thought through an elaborate kind of detailed structure, so we'll just have to kind of roll with it. I can talk about all kinds of things. I wrote up some potential ideas or potential topics I could write about, either related to my particular experiences in the past or just kind of topics in general. And then Chris and Ken thought it'd be interesting to go through some of their ideas and just get feedback from someone who may not know what they're talking about. And then thirdly, we have some alumni from a previous session, or kind of last semester, I guess. Peter and Ilya, and Cameron, right? Calvin, sorry. And Calvin. And those guys are great, so I want you guys to be able to share in their vibe a little bit. And so feel free to ask me any questions at any time, or just raise your hand. And then you also have this little handout here. This is a handout I put together for last semester's class when I spoke. And basically, it's just it's mostly a synopsis of my experiences with Sabi, both failures and successes. And so that might also just be good kind of fodder for things to ask them about in more detail. Okay. So how do you guys feel in terms of your handle on ideas and picking an idea and what makes a good idea? And kind of I don't know, I just mentioned Drew Houston from Dropbox. Did he talk about kind of oil-filled metaphor and stuff like that? Did he talk about ideas, liking ideas very much at all? Has anyone? Any of the speakers? Okay, cool. So I'll spend maybe 10 minutes on that and see how we're doing in terms of if you guys think it's useful. Because that's what I talked about last time since I was the first speaker.
I'm still mad at him for running Windows on a Mac.
Well, Domni was best Windows desktop software, so I'm trying to switch. I got the terminal open and everything in the Mac. Okay, so these are two of my professors at MIT who I really love, Hari Balakrishnan and Leslie Calvin, who are just awesome, so I'll do a quick shout out. And another shout out to my boy Drew. He started Dropbox in his Sabi living room in a Harvard Square apartment in early 2006. So that's just been an awesome kind of partnership. Just more background. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about ideas for startups. So basically, if you think about it from an MIT kind of structure, how do you define a process and so forth? At some point you have an idea, and then the question is this really a good idea to build a startup out of? And most of them are not good ideas to build a startup out of. And so there are a couple of filters, and we'll talk about those filters. So for example, it might be possible to build some small incremental value for a user or consumer, but it may be really hard to reach them and so on. So you have to kind of balance all these things. And when you're around at least Silicon Valley, maybe as Drew and I have been, you kind of pick up all these heuristics, and you kind of get these reflexes where you're going to hear an idea and then give your opinion on it. And a lot of times you're wrong, right? I would have thought that Groupon would have failed, but maybe Groupon had a 1 in 10 chance, and maybe there are 10 other people who had the same exact business model but didn't succeed, like YouTube versus the other video, video distribution sites. Okay, so let's talk about filters. So make something people want. Make something people really want. So this is a Y Combinator t-shirt, and this is the most succinct kind of description of what makes a good startup idea. And there are all kinds, you think that this would just be basic blocking and tackling, and people have had this figured out, but basically they don't. So the biggest risk is that you make something people don't want. Right? Like, and here we're like, the top like VC of all time, like John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins, is just like super pumped up about the, whatever this thing is called. And, they just like miss it completely. And they didn't test their market beforehand, and they kind of like miss the fact that you look like a douche when you're like driving this on the street. And so furthermore, like not only were these guys backed by like Kleiner Perkins and raised like tens of millions of dollars, but also it was a bad product. So like, what happens in these like extreme like quadrant of little grid, and it basically doesn't work. So good marketing can't fix a bad product. Okay. Yeah, I mean, these are like my favorite filters. You'll
Can you
see
share
them.
these slides, by the way?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
We'll just kind of talk through these as we talk through different startup ideas, but these are some just like heuristics to look for. So like just a simple example, like PayPal had a really natural business model. They're just like anytime you're in the middle of a transaction, if you're able, it's just a known of that space that if you're able to get traction, then you will be able to monetize. Versus like other markets, like it can be easy to get traction, like 4chan or something. Like the average user monetizes at like a tenth of a penny per year or something. Reddit's another great example, like just really, really bad monetization because there's no intent, so you can't really monetize. On the other hand, if you have like a blog for, I think one startup ideas here is related to travel. Travel monetizes really well, but Reddit does not. So, just heuristics like that. So coming up with, so how do you come up with like the ideas to begin with, the candidate ideas? It's really hard. So the reason it's really hard is because it's a very natural human thing to become immune to problems that you have, right? Like, I have to shower. Like, that's a problem. You don't think it's a problem, but like, if I suddenly told you, like, or, I have to sleep, or like, whatever, and just, it's like, at every single turn, the events, there are problems, right? Like, the person who isn't in class right now, like, should be in class, or they should be able to, like, watch class remotely. And so there are like millions of problems every day, and so the only way to cope with that fact is to basically come down to the problems. So this is like actually a different day, but like I just kind of broke down, it's like a stream of like different problems that I ran into over a 1 hour time period. And so when I was trying to come up with startup ideas last year, I was like trying to come up with ideas, and like you'd think it would be easy, but really there is no process, right? Like there's no machine that like I can turn a crank or like sit down at my desk for an hour and like deterministically churn out like 3 different ideas. It's like this really kind of abstract thing. The other way to come up with startup ideas, other than trying to drill into problems that you have but have become numb to, is kind of try to do unstructured learning. So it's like read TechCrunch and then like have some different patterns of different things. So for me, I really like data. And so when I came up with Zopni, basically I was like looking at data mining and looking for like new data sets. And then someone mentioned like email, and I was like, holy shit, like there's a lot of data in email. It's totally underutilized. Let's like go through data analysis on email. And so basically, you have these like mental like thought patterns that you are thinking about, and you're applying them to basically new inputs that you can pull in from the web and so on. Okay, so market versus product. Okay, yeah. So this one is interesting. I did the oil field analogy last semester, and I did the poker table strategy this semester. So like if you're a professional poker player, where do you go to play poker? Well, you don't go to like the poker table with like the best people, right? You want to go to like Harris, where like all the older people are, and find like a low stakes tables, at least to get to a certain skill point. And so like so much of the outcome of the evening isn't like kind of what you ate yesterday or how much sleep you got. It's like what table you sit down at. And so similarly with startup ideas, a lot of times stuff will just like predictably fail. You're like, oh, that's a really bad idea because like X, Y, Z, or I've seen that pattern before. And so if you're going to really commit like 5 years of your life or like your youth, like that's like a lot of commitment to make. And so for me, like when I really started to deliberately look for startup ideas and really started to deliberately work on my next company, I told myself I'll take up to 1.5 years to find the right startup idea. Because I really want to find something that I'm going to be serious about and that will have a high likelihood of payoff. And so just like make sure that you're kind of conscious of those different trade-offs. I think a lot of times, like especially with people like us, like MIT people, just like super high energy, we just want to like get to work. And because that first ideation stage is so kind of abstract, we just want to skip through it as quickly as possible. And then, we get to work. But then once you start to get to work, you have some costs and everything else. And so this can be just like a pretty self-defeating pattern. And you can always pivot, right? And so I'll actually bring this to the oil field. This is kind of useful. Okay, so I'll go to the oil field. So basically, you can think of your market as the oil field in which you're drilling, and then like the particular project building as like the specific location where you're drilling. So like PayPal, for example, their markets was like payments, basically. And PayPal went through several different iterations of the company. And the earliest iteration was basically sending people money over like an IR channel, like through Palm Pilots. So I mean, it's just like way too early, just like broken in so many ways. But they raised some money because it was like 1999 and everyone was raising money in 1997 or whatever it was. And that didn't work out. Well, it turned out that they were drilling in a good oil field, but the particular point where they chose to drill was wrong. And so rather than dogmatically just sticking with what they were doing, they pivoted, the word pivot just kind of like moved in the last couple of years. So, but they basically changed their product to be just like P2P cash transactions over the web. And then that was a huge hit, right? And so if you look at a company like Zobni, for example, like our first product was this product company called Zobni Analytics. And Zobni Analytics was like Google Analytics for email. So you create all kinds of like tables and charts and whatnot for like your relationships and who you email the most, who responds to you the fastest, and so on. But it turned out basically that wasn't valuable, at least not to individuals. And so we started showing it to people, and the first set of people we showed it to were kind of just these like management consultants, and they loved it. They said, oh wow, if we could like deploy this in an enterprise, we could see how salespeople's email response times correlate with sales conversion and like blah, 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 blah. On the other hand, individuals just weren't that turned on by it. There was maybe something, the problem with analytics as a category, especially for individuals, is that this data just doesn't change that often, and it's very hard for it to be actionable. So I was actually short Mint when like Mint came out, because it's basically like personal financial analytics, right? Like how often are people really going to change their habits, on Mint, or like are they really going to go back and look at it like every month? And when they got bought by Intuit a year or two ago, like it was a double. It was kind of a double. They were playing in a really good market, right? So like financial products, those are easily monetizable, but they had a huge user acquisition problem, basically. The only way that they could find to do user acquisition was through PR and marketing, and even then, like once you get past the early adopters, it's hard to motivate consumers like by law to give you access to their like financial data and so on and so on and so on. And like it's still TBD, right? So people, after Mint got bought, people are starting these startups that are like, Fitbit is a great example, right? So you guys know this company, Fitbit? Okay, so basically they make this like really small like hardware device. It's pretty cool actually. I have one. I've been aware of it. It's just analytics. It's not actionable. But it's this like small hardware device. You clip it on your pants, and basically it's a pedometer. So it'll count like the number of steps you take like, per day and when you take them and so on. And you like put it on this like little docking device, upload it to the web, and then you have like this nice like kind of interface into your statistics of like walking and exercise. And I think it's going to have like a similar outcome as like Mint, like to be honest, because you can get the early adopters and people are super motivated to analyze their like workouts or like exercise, but it's not going to go mainstream. I think probability of going mainstream is quite low. So anyway, we decided that we don't want to become an enterprise email analytics company. There are a couple of those. You could go with management consultants, like doing compliance, so like email compliance is a big deal in public companies. Sarbanes-Oxley and blah, blah, blah. We decided we didn't want to do that, so we basically scrapped Zobni Analytics, which was like a fair amount of work, not a huge amount, but a fair amount. And then we came up with something called the Zobni Sidebar, which is kind of our current kind of flagship product today. And so that was a pivot, right? So we were working inside of email. We said, as a category, email hasn't really changed in 10 years. It's still like a list of folders, a list of messages in the folder, and like a preview area. So there's got to be something here. That was kind of the thesis for the market. And then on this product, at this specific point where we were drilling, we had to change that up. Any questions so far? Is this interesting to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so Zodney, huge market, daily paying, I guess I can talk about this stuff. Okay, other kind of things.
What does Zodney sidebar do?
Oh, so basically what the Zodney sidebar does, it actually, you guys are distracted. So Zodney basically, okay. Zodney sidebar, basically it's an add-in to Microsoft Outlook. We've had like over 5 million downloads. And what we do is we add a sidebar to the right-hand side of the main window. And we show you an information profile about the person who sent the email you're looking at. So if I'm looking at an email from Chris, I'll see his picture, pulled from LinkedIn or Facebook. We have partnerships with those guys. I'll see a list of all the files we sent back and forth recently. I'll see a list of people we know in common based on CCs and past messages, so Ken will be at the top of that list. I'll see like a list of recent conversations threaded like Gmail. I'll see Chris's phone number, which we extract from email signatures or message bodies. If I mouse over that phone number, I'll be able to see the snippet of the email where that phone number came from, so that's the right one. And then we have really powerful and fast email search. So you can search your emails, your contacts, your calendar, your attachments, etc., just all from one box. There are a couple of things that make that interesting, just from like if we're going to talk about product design for like a second, a little sidebar. What we found from Zodney Analytics were two things. One, people are important. So when we were giving these demos for Zodney Analytics, we had like all these different ways to slice the data. But basically, we found ourselves giving demos centered around use cases that had to do with people, right? So like, when does Paul reply to emails, for example? So people are interesting, and like, and email, people are not like first-class citizens, right? Like they're just not. Email is usually not organized by a person; it's organized by time or whatever. And then the second thing that we found from Zodney Analytics was just like you have to be in the user's daily workflow. You have to like be in front of them kind of by default. This is like a big problem with like iPhone apps, for example, or even websites, right? Like if the user doesn't remember your URL, or like go open up their iPhone and like launch your whatever ABC app, they're just not going to do it. So like actually like iPhone retention of users is very, very low for this reason. And so basically we took those two lessons. So people are important and you have to be in the daily workflow. You have to be in the daily workflow. That's why we have a sidebar that's like open whenever your Outlook is open, which by the way is a huge amount of time per day for a lot of inside of enterprises. And then, you know, we started off doing putting several different types of content into the sidebar. And then we kind of zeroed in on the information about the person who sent the email you're looking at. So not only is that person-centric, but it's also sensitive to the context of what you're working on. So that's the third thing. So show information that's about what the user's working on right now, versus like we used to have feeds that were like, you know, emails that are flooded in your inbox or whatever, upcoming appointments. So trying to interrupt the user, give the user data that isn't relevant to what they're trying to do right now is less helpful. So that's the Zodney sidebar. Those are kind of the three main strategic insights. And I'll talk about Zodney kind of next gen. So Zodney next gen is interesting because what we ran up against is almost the same problem as like Mint and those guys, right? Like just like after you kind of get through the initial phase of kind of early adopter users, in order to punch in the mainstream, it can be very hard, especially for things that are built on top of another product that people use, because that's typically kind of a more sophisticated mental model for the user. So another example of this would be StumbleUpon, which is a browser extension. Or basically like any browser extension, like it's really hard to be successful to punch into the mainstream. And so what we're working on now, and then the other problem actually, which is almost just as bad, actually maybe even worse, is that for the longest time we were Outlook only. And Outlook has a huge user base, and so I think it was good to start there. You know, Outlook has, they claim 500 to 600 million users. I think it's probably more like 150 million users of Outlook. But still, that's like bigger than Gmail. You know, it's pretty big. And not to mention that, but these are also users with credit card. They tend to be using it in a work setting. So our conversion of premium is actually really, really high and advantageous. But when it comes to figuring out how to build a company that's going to have tens of millions of users, we have to do something else. So right now we're working on basically Zodney in the cloud, and it's going to be able to talk to your Gmail and your Facebook and your LinkedIn and your BlackBerry and your iPhone and your Android. And we'll basically build this like unified address book that has everyone we've ever talked to in ranked order with like photos, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm super excited for that. Beyond just getting access to a larger addressable market, I'm also super excited about it because the early adopters haven't been able to use Zodney yet. So, you know, I don't know how many of you guys use Outlook, but who uses Outlook? Okay, that's like more than I expected actually, but I would say like 20%, maybe 15%. And so many people, especially in Silicon Valley, just can't use Zombie. And so we've had just all this like latent demand that we haven't been able to service. And so I'm extremely excited to service that, especially because early adopters tend to, be an important part of the adoption curve. And there's also the the n-squared kind of benefits of being cross-platform. So like if you look at Dropbox, for example, Dropbox has not only benefited from addressing the early adopter community early with their Mac versions of the product and Linux versions of the product, and they've been able to parlay that to a more mainstream kind of adoption pattern. But also, because they're so cross-platform, you can just generate, kind of this n-squared value of the user, because I can use Dropbox on my iPad or my computer or whatever. It also raises barrier to entry. And so Zombie is lining up to kind of hit these check marks, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Okay, yeah, so lost cause, which is almost there, is a thin line. I mean, if you've been working on a company for like 3 years and you're like, wow, we've tried to pivot twice or 3 times and nothing has worked yet, you could give up, you could keep going. It's often just before you succeed that people give up. But it's incredibly nuanced. So like if you look at a company like Flickr, Flickr went through like basically 5 years of like nothing, like no success before they kind of iterated into it. It started out as like an online game of some type. And they found photo sharing. If you look at a company like Groupon, Groupon started out as a way to organize like people in the real world to do like movements, so to speak. And then they basically focused on this like group buying thing, and then they took off. Another one in mind. But yeah, I mean, like basically all these companies have some sort of like failure in their early days, and then they basically tweak their model a little bit and took off. So it's just like it's nuanced. I don't know what that was. Blue versus red waters. Yeah, so I mean, this also just comes back to like personal style, right? My personal style is like much more kind of like blue waters, build up like massive kind of advantages, and then just kind of descend upon your enemy. It's like my metaphor here is like when I play StarCraft. I like to just like hoard all the forces in my base and get so large that there's like no way you can stop me. And that was very much like Zombie. I think Dropbox was kind of that way a little bit. Versus more red waters would be like if you're trying to start a Groupon competitor right now, there are like 100 of those. Or if you're doing like Facebook apps in like 2008 or 9 or something, there were just like tons of people doing those, and you're just super competing. And so maybe for some people, there's like kind of a rushing strategy. But for me, and I think maybe certain MIT types, it's just much better. And actually, when I tell you guys what I'm going to be doing next for my new company, you'll see it's totally this style. Okay, market timing, things don't work until they do, right? So there are all of these like kind of trends and technology, and YouTube is just a perfect example, right? Because YouTube was basically, there's a company called broadcast.com in the late 90s that was basically trying to do video and audio streaming over the web. And of course, this is when everyone had dial-up and so on. And it basically didn't work. So yeah, they were successful, and Yahoo bought them for $1 billion, but then Yahoo like basically wrote off that whole purpose. Like it was basically an asset where it's zero. But once you get to whatever it was, 2006, and people have enough like broadband penetration, and Adobe Flash is like shipped with like sophisticated enough video codecs, and you maybe have like blogs, so you, like this embed thing is kind of powerful, and maybe kind of social. The web is more social, and so it's easier for stuff to be more viral. So once these things kind of kicked in, the like N+1 online video company worked, and that was like YouTube. And so that's kind of just like also an interesting pattern to know. Here's some like kind of up and coming products, right? FaceTime, Chrome OS, Apple TV. What was the last one? Web-based graphics editors. I know like less ambitious on that one. But I mean, like who wants to place bets? Like any thoughts? I mean, this stuff is hard. And this is basically what VCs have to do. This is like their job. And so they come up with like, I'd say like generally a pretty good set of heuristics and so on. And people, you kind of like pick up just these like mental patterns of like, okay, well, for this startup idea, someone tried it 4 years ago, what's changed since then, or what's your like unique kind of thing, and so on and so on. Okay, these are ideas from last year. So I'll give you guys kind of the quick pitch on each of these. Helping people meet people, I thought and still think that online dating is hugely broken. So I actually just wrote like a blog post about this, like basically all my thoughts on this topic. It was pretty popular. If you guys want to check it out, it's at blog.adamsmith.cc. But basically, I'm like rusty on my pitch because I haven't talked about it in a while. Basically, like online dating sucks. So, like, if you look at companies like Match.com or the people, like, what is the total like market cap of this industry? Basically, this industry drives like $500 million in revenue per year. So, I really think that like in 10 or 20 years, it'll be driving $5 billion or like more than that per year, because the human need for like partnership is so strong. But there's so many problems with the online dating stuff today. So, one example is if I'm like at a bar or I'm like meeting friends of friends. There's really low social distance there, right? So like I'm not going to act antisocially or whatever because there are reputational effects. But like on Match.com and so on, the social distance is really high. And so basically like people spam and people, there's like hypergaming, which is basically going after people who are more attractive than you, like everyone wants to do that and so on. And so if I like sign up for Match.com today, I create a profile. I like find like 6 girls that I like. I send them all like very detailed like messages like, hey, you seem really cool, blah, blah, blah. Like basically the problem with Match is only premium members can send messages, and only 15% of members are premium members. So basically, like I send a message to 6 girls, on average, only 1 is even able to reply. And so basically, I get like no responses, and then I start spamming, and just basically it's like hugely dysfunctional, but it generates this like $500 million in revenue because like the need is so fundamental. And if you look at like what people like OkCupid are doing, I think it's interesting. I think OkCupid is kind of at the forefront. But like the whole notion of like online profiles really sucks. Because basically, not only does it suck from an out-of-box experience, that like when I sign up, I'm just given these like, like 500 check boxes and these like 8 text areas and expected to be witty and blah, 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 blah. But like also from a consumption experience, so like people misrepresent themselves. It's like just really hard to get information, the signal-to-noise ratio is very, very bad. Yeah, and you can read the blog post. Like it's actually, my thoughts are pretty detailed. But I decided not to do this. And mostly why I decided not to do this was because I wasn't convinced I'd be able to figure it out. Mostly from a product design standpoint. So when it comes to like technical stuff, like I can just knock whatever technical stuff out of the ballpark. But when it comes to like understanding human behavior and like societal, especially like on large scales, I just wasn't confident that like I'd be able to figure it out. Like I'm more like a Bill Gates than a Steve Jobs. And for like the right kind of person, I think you could work in the space and maybe be successful. I was also afraid that there are so many different, like the search space of possible products you can build here is so large that success is more likely to be driven by lots of trials and lots of failures than like one person being able to like basically aim and then pull the trigger and hit the target. And so, if I could basically buy an index fund of all like dating startups for the next like 10 years, I probably would. But to be like one of those individual startups, like I probably wouldn't want to do that. Okay, background audio. So this one is basically like streaming audio 24/7 from your phone to the cloud. And like what can you do with that audio? And yeah, anything like weird books. I felt like just a brain fuck. So you can do it. Like basically battery life is such, it's not that hard to record, right? Basically you're sampling 44,000 times a second and sending out to a flash, and sending it over 3G wouldn't work basically, so you have to wait for the next gen networking, or you can do batching, or you can wait for the Wi-Fi connection or whatever. There are a lot of different things you can do. The first obvious thing is to transcribe all the conversations people have with each other. There's certain laws about that. And, it's okay. Even if you think you can get around the laws, which I think is actually possible, like there's like these like norms that people have that like, if I was recording a conversation that we're having without you knowing about it, it's kind of awkward. I have to disclose that I'm recording, but then that's awkward too. So there's just these pesky humans getting in the way. And there are other like analytics things you can do, right? You tell me how many times I go to the bathroom per day, there's all kinds of data there. It's kind of interesting. How long did I spend in the car per day? But then this is just like analytics, right? If it's not actionable, it's not going to be interesting. But actually, this idea kind of led to my present idea. And I'll tell you guys what that is, and then we will start maybe the startup reviews. Okay, so I kind of went for, so I kind of pivoted this idea and started thinking about business meeting transcription. So that's like a subset of transcribing conversations that's maybe more valuable, more interesting. So basically, you know, like every day, like people wake up and go to work, and then like people at their office like often have meetings. And wouldn't it be interesting, or you know, if you just had like a speakerphone device in like every conference room of like every Fortune 500 company with just like a big go button. And as soon as you press that go button, it starts like recording your conversation, it creates a transcript of it, uploads it to the local intranet or whatever. And then it becomes searchable, or if someone like missed a meeting, they can scan through it. Or, you know, like social inside of enterprise, like Salesforce has this product called Chatter, which you can kind of put that, almost like a news feed of meetings going on in your company. So the number one problem in big companies or big organizations is communication. And so, you know, it's kind of interesting. And so why isn't that happening yet? And it turns out basically that that doesn't happen because transcription is really hard. And so this really pissed me off. You know, if you look up what are how accurate is automatic transcription on kind of conversational speech, like the error rates are like 30-40% word error rate. So basically it's like gibberish, right? I think Google Voice, like you do voicemail transcription, it's not good. And so I went to bed depressed, and I woke up the next morning. I was like, well, why isn't it good? And I basically found out that like the speech field is hugely dysfunctional, both in academia and in industry. So basically the pitch is something like this. If you have an hour of audio you want to transcribe, it costs between $50 and $200 per hour to transcribe, to get a transcript of that audio. On the high end, that's medical transcription, which is a $16 billion market. So doctors, after they see you, they call up a service, and they're like, I just saw Adam transcribe it, yes, he has that. If he comes back with this, do that, just for like legal and billing reasons. And on the low end, that's mechanical Turk, right? So just like basically, you chop the audio up into 2-minute segments, you get people to transcribe it, you get editors stitch them together, and control quality, and so on. But you know, if you really wanted to drive the cost down to $5 per hour, or 50 cents per hour, or 5 cents per hour, eventually you have to be able to do it automatically. And you know, these like the most sophisticated speech recognizers have these 30-40% word error rates on general speech. And so the whole thesis of the company is basically that it should be possible with the right kind of startup to build a high-accuracy general purpose recognizer. And so the thesis then is that there are these structural problems that are holding back academia and industry from being able to do this. So in academia, for example, the largest training data sets that people use is like 1,000 hours of labeled audio. Whereas I think it should be possible to get 100,000 or 1 million hours of labeled audio. So basically 100 to 1,000 times the amount of training data. But you need a business to do that. You have to be able to conduct commerce as a transcription business. You can't do that as an academic. So that's one downward pressure on academia, or structural problem with academia. There's another structural problem with academia, which is if you compare the speech recognition field to the video compression field. In video compression, every 10 years, there's a major standards effort. And the MPEG group basically does a call for proposals, and all of these companies, Philips, Microsoft, IBM, Sony, you know, so on and so on, they'll submit these like very detailed proposal specifications, coupled with like, you know, elaborate, like detailed source code and everything else. And they want their shit to get in the standard, because if they get their ideas in the standard, then they get the patent royalties, right? And so there's just this like very well-oiled machine that basically is able to take research results and move them into production systems, right? So the MPEG group like does this like call for standards, they do the standards process, and then that standard compression and decompression stuff ends up in your Blu-ray player or your YouTube or whatever. But in speech, no one's like taking research results and like aggregating them into production systems. Like no one. Like you'd think they would, but it doesn't happen. So for example, like every year there's over like 100 speech papers published. And there are like 3 or 4 really good ideas. But if you like look back at the last 10 years of like what were the good ideas, and then you look at the recognizers that are out there today, they just don't integrate those good ideas. Because any given recognizer, at least in the academic side, is only worked on by like 2 or 3 PhDs for like 3 or 4 years. So for example, like the de facto open source recognizer, the #1 recognizer is called Sphinx. It's out of CMU. It's 50,000 lines of Java. You know, so just like super, super simple, like, and as a ratio or comparison to the research that's been done. And people also don't share the results. Like the average speech paper is like 4 or 5 pages long. No one shares source code. MIT speech recognizer is actually closed source. And I think these are all for basically kind of like archaic issues from like the 80s where people thought it'd be like a gold rush, and so they hoarded all their stuff and thought that they would get revenues from licensing. And so in academia, basically, no one's aggregating these innovations into production systems. In industry, there's a big company called Nuance, which is a $5 billion public company, and they're a roll company. Basically, they think it's cheaper to do R&D through acquisitions rather than in-house. And so basically, they wait for a speech company to get 10 to 50 million in revenue. They sue them for patent infringement. They buy them. They fire all their R&D staff, and they just push those existing products through their massive sales channels. So they've done like 23 acquisitions in the last 5 years. So not only is that like a huge downward pressure on kind of sustained innovation, but also like speech startups basically just aren't ambitious enough. So like what ends up happening, is like basically they'll start, even if they have like kind of grand ambitions, they'll get kind of forced by investors or their own impatience or whatever to go after low-hanging fruit rather than make like foundational investments. And so the whole thesis is basically if you build a startup that's built to basically build kind of a novel recognizer using modern scales of training data, which is available through recent access to cheap labor pools, in combination with kind of web-scale computational resources, in combination with like 2 to 3 year kind of long-term vision, and the right kind of set of investors behind you, and so on, that you have actually like a pretty decent shot at building like 10% word error rate recognizer within like 2 to 3 years for general purpose speech. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so 7:45. Which one is first? I guess it's Justin. So who's Social Cal? All right, come up to the judgment table here. And pull the trigger for sure. All right, so here are their slides. So basically, I got Justin from Justin.tv to agree to a phone call. Oh, okay, yeah. So we'll try it. Let's see if he answers. So Justin started a company called Kiko in 2005, which was an online calendar. And so I thought it'd be interesting to maybe get his feedback or maybe have a conversation with him. We're going to call through Skype because iPhone sucks. All right.
Are you have video from or just audio?
Just audio, I think. We'll have like another dude with video, I think, possibly in a moment. Sounds like a mess up the ordering. All right, so get ready to pitch.
And are they being taped, by the way? I see a little camera back there.
Yes.
In case it wasn't enough.
Remember that social awkwardness telling people they're being recorded?
Oh, yes. There we go. That's a good point. All right, so we're going to talk into this guy, I guess. Sure. Speakerphone, so it should be okay.
Hey, Adam.
Justin Kahn.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good, dude. I'm taking my phone a friend lifeline.
What was that?
And nothing. You're on speakerphone with 80 MIT kids.
Nice, awesome.
Sweet.
Not the first time I've talked to people smarter than I am.
Did you get a chance to look over the slides that I sent maybe a few minutes ago?
No, you said slides, so now I'm in trouble.
Oh, no, it's okay. So basically, there's a startup here called Social Cal, which is an online calendaring startup. And, we could either have them kind of give you their quick pitch, and or you could also just talk about kind of your thoughts on online calendars in general, or online scheduling in general.
Sure, well, yeah, they can give me the pitch if you want. Did you explain, like, why I must be considered someone who would know anything at all?
Yeah, they got your background. They're definitely fans of Justin.tv as well. All right, so here's the pitch. Go ahead.
All right, so When you guys were, yeah, okay. So, I'm gonna talk to the computer here and the class, so it gets a little weird to understand or hear, just let me know. So when you guys were planning your meetings as teams, it probably was pretty messed up. Likely you guys all sent out like emails to each other, and you're like, oh, I'm free now, and oh, I'm free in like a little while, maybe text message, maybe even use Google. But it was likely kind of difficult to figure out when you were all able to meet. The unfortunate part is that probably almost all of you already have an online calendar that has all that information in it. You know when you're free and when you're busy, and you're all relatively busy people, and you probably put that information in your calendar. How easy would it be if you were able to go online, say, I want to meet with these people, click a button, and an online service checks all of those people's calendars and lets you know when you're all free to meet. Beyond that, these people are your classmates, and they're your friends, and they're people that you probably know and like, hopefully, and that are your teammates. But how great would it be if you could be able to see what your friends are up to, what's going on Friday night, what events are in your area, and are you able to go to? Right now, there are a lot of different options out there about how to schedule things or what events are going on, but none of them take into consideration when you and the other people you want to hang out with are free. So that's the quick pitch.
Great.
Did you hear that okay?
Yeah, no, I heard it. It took me back. So when we started Chico, we had a very similar vision. And what we wanted to do was not only make the first like Outlook-like calendar on the web, like a Web 2.0 calendar web application. We also had all these ideas about how to integrate social features, and like you could share calendars with your friends, and it would like wanted to suggest how to like events that people can do together, and things like that. And I would say the number one thing that I learned about calendars after working on it for about a year was that nobody really wants calendars without email.
Without
I actually talked about this with Adam, like before they started talking, he was about working on an email startup, and he was saying he was going to build an email competitor in addition to all the like something we're doing to do, had plans for stuff, and whenever we sat down to actually talk about it, I was like, you guys have calendars need. So I would definitely think about how you're going to get distribution, because it was extremely hard for us as a standalone and to convince people that they wanted like a separate calendar solution. I think a lot of people just use whatever they have as a Google Calendar, or they're using, they use Outlook Calendar because it's like there, and the thing they're doing most of the time is email, and only some of the time they're using calendars. They put up with like a more inferior solution.
Justin, what do you think about like letting them keep their existing calendar and just like being kind of the intermediate layer that adds value on top of whatever calendar they're using already?
Yeah, I probably didn't do the best job of my pitch of clarifying that, but that was kind of the goal.
Yeah, that's probably a way better distribution strategy, to be honest. Like being like a zombie of calendars, like a plugin or something that, or like a Chrome extension or something that will let you, have like some value-added features on top of the calendar. I think it's probably a good idea, because one, you don't have to build some sort of like complex calendaring system, which is not impossible, obviously, but less kind of pain in the ass. And then you'd also be able to, like easily bootstrap without having to make a hard choice about the solution.
Got it. Are there any particular distribution strategies that you've seen like scheduling startups use or calendar startups use that were interesting to you, like in particular?
Well, I can totally see if you can, I haven't really seen any recently, but I think that you could definitely do something around, inviting, like, so if I'm inviting somebody else, it encourages them to, they get some, the other party gets some sort of value add from downloading the plugin as well, right? That would be something cool. I don't know what that would be.
Yeah.
But it would be awesome.
Cool. Any other words of wisdom?
just, I think the distribution is the hardest part. I think that when we did our startup, we didn't think about how, like, the cost of switching to an independent calendar solution. So, like, most people either didn't need a calendar enough that they really cared, or were in control of their calendar because they had to use, they were using Outlook, or they were using, some other solution that was packaged. And so, like, it's pretty important to actually understand that that's, like, it's not really viable to compete with those people without having a full solution. And then also, like, when we were doing it, we weren't sure whether we were social or enterprise. It's, like, pretty important that you pick up market because the needs of somebody who's, like, business users are a lot different from the needs of, like, somebody who wants that social calendar, which is something that's not really, like, there's no product out there that's like a social calendar, really.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense.
got it. Cool. Do you guys have any other questions? Oh, that's okay.
We get his contact.
Yeah.
Justin.
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email at justin@justin.tv if you want. I mean, this is probably like a incoherent and kind of like off the cuff speaking that I'm doing right now. So, like, if you want to shoot me an email and get some discussion going, that'd be cool. Just justin@justin.tv.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, totally, dude. Thanks again.
All right.
Ciao.
Talk to you later.
Can I just pull up a screenshot of Justin.tv or maybe his face or something? I will contact people who haven't heard of Justin TV.
Oh, have you guys heard of Justin.tv? Who's heard of Justin.tv? Okay, so basically Justin.tv, okay, so I'll mention, let's see what this does. So it's like, actually what I want is a Google search.
Hey, Chris? What?
Yeah, there's Justin. So Justin.tv started out as this guy named Justin wearing a camera 24/7. It was like always live and like streaming to the web. You could just go there and watch Justin make a fool of himself. And they got so much PR out of it. Like front page of San Francisco Chronicle above the full like huge picture, like just so much PR. Anyway, they eventually basically Justin.tv today is a live video streaming platform, kind of Ustream. It's like the Ustream competitor kind of. And Justin.tv was started by Justin and Emmett, who started a company called Kiko, which was an online calendar in 2005, like before Google had Google Calendar. And it was a Y Combinator company, and it basically didn't work out. Like Google built Google Calendar and so on, and then they sold it on they sold the business Kiko on eBay for $250,000 to 2 cows, and then 2 cows like got no value out of it. But it was,
So calendar seems like a red ocean, doesn't it?
yeah, well, it's just like, I don't know. So there's this other startup, Sched.org, which I just heard about South by Southwest for the first time this year. These guys actually we broke into a hotel together. And this seems kind of similar. So basically, like, calendars are done. Like, there's going to be no, like, incremental feature you can add to calendars, I think, at least from, like, a simple standpoint, that will differentiate you enough. And then plus, like, for someone to switch calendars is super hard, like Justin said. And so I think, like, kind of building on top of calendars, and, like, also with just, like, this social angle, right? Let's see what else we do. Personal schedule builder, seamless social networking, mobile websites and applications, speaker exhibitor list, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I mean, this kind of stuff is, like, TBD. I think, kind of like Zappy is, like, trying to build, like, a platform on top of email and address books. Like, building a platform on top of calendars, I think is somewhat interesting. You're going to have to find your, like, top 2 use cases, basically, that don't work today. And, like, finding mutual times isn't going to be enough, I think. There have been, like, a lot of companies that tried it. TimeBridge was one. They, like, tried to basically make it easy for people to schedule meetings together.
Can I make a suggestion? I was just thinking about how we would use this. Google Calendar does have something like this for people who are on your email chain. Outlook, the newest version, has it. But what would be cool is if you have a bunch of people on the list, you could forward it to an email address, right? Like, help@schedule.org or whatever, and have it, get the request or get approval from everybody who's on that email list, and then have it do it automatically and use natural language processing like Google Calendar. It's like forward and say, we need a meeting next week, right? And then have it forward back like a bunch of stuff. Like make it that easy, as opposed to having to go into another site, log in and have another email address or login information that I have to remember.
So their company would run the central server that's receiving these emails,
Yeah,
and they would teach that server how to go scrape various different calendars?
yeah, like I like that I can text message my Google Calendar and be like, don't forget Tuesday at 8, right? And it shows up on my calendar automatically. It'd be sweet if my team, and I could just be like, Ford, we need a meeting next week at 8 or whatever.
And wouldn't you guess Doodle is trying that now?
Is Doodle doing it?
I haven't seen it released yet, but I would have to think if anyone there has half a brain, they're thinking about that. That's why I'm thinking of this as a red ocean, and I'm trying to think of where they can really add unique value.
So I guess in response, the value that we're trying to add is that, like, a big issue that Justin brought up, which I totally agree with, is like, I like Google Calendar a lot, and I don't want to change, like, I don't want to switch away from it. And I think most users are relatively locked into that platform. At the same time, the services that Google has now, like, you can, if somebody creates a doodle poll, you can connect it to your calendar so that you don't have to manually, like, click in every box. But it's still, like, far from automated and far from easy to use. So the goal would be to have a service that allows you to create an event and have the group kind of decide on the parameters of that event, whether it be when is the best time to meet and where is the best time to meet, or like, what do you guys want to do. And once the moment you click, yeah, I'm going to be there, it shows up in your Google Calendar, and you have that already done, instead of having to have everybody manually go through and update all of their personal calendars on their own. I guess that's the added functionality that you don't get anywhere else.
I think part of it also that we haven't really addressed yet is that we want to make it, like you were talking about how it needs to be interactive to really generate like use and interest. And so one major thing we want to have is a functionality where when you can suggest like, hey, let's meet up, I want to do this, and then you can sort of start like a poll on like what activity you would all like to do. This would be obviously not necessarily for like a group meeting where it's structured, but for sort of a free structured event that you can develop on the fly, and everybody gets to put in their input. I think that'd be a much more interactive sort of fun thing to do.
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
So there's just something I'll throw out there to consider, and one problem with Doodle right now and having groups is there's a difference between times when I'm free and times when I'd be willing to meet, and that also changes depending on what the meeting would be about.
Yes.
So I think that would be, because, I mean, I see there being a potential issue of if you have somebody go through and say, for this particular subject, these are the times I'd be willing to meet, that would be, I mean, technically I'm free to meet Friday morning, but according to every Doodle poll I've ever filled out, I'm not free to meet Friday morning.
Right.
So,
I think one thing we were talking about that as well, and I think one thing that we came up to that may be a solution was that we wanted to have some sort of labeling system for your calendars, sort of like how you can label your emails in Gmail. Right now you can have like different calendars, but it's difficult to actually like label them specifically. And then based on those labels, you can come up with privacy settings, and additionally like settings that allow you to decide, like, oh, this is like sort of an event, but like tell me about the things that might be going on now. Because I'm still interested in doing other things like during this time slot, even though I do have something there.
So before you guys get into really deeply into like event scheduling, there's like a two-pronged part of our project, and the second prong we actually haven't talked about, which is where we're actually going to get the monetization from it. And that comes from the fact that the social calendar that we're using kind of like as an intermediary for Facebook events for your Google Calendar for Outlook is sort of an aggregation engine to be able to figure out what you could be doing on any time at any place. So like our kind of thought was, okay, what do I want my calendar to do? I want my calendar to be able to schedule events. I want my calendar to be able to say, okay, on Friday night, what am I doing? What are my friends doing? What are other events going on outside? So that's like a huge value proposition that we're giving, which is that we have the social calendar that says, I mean, like right now, what's the best way to organize like your events on one calendar? You have Google Calendar, and Facebook has kind of like an XML feed that you can feed into, so you can accept kind of all of the, like indiscriminately all the Facebook events that you say you might be attending or something. And that's not really good enough. If you have a social calendar where you have friends of different priority levels, then you can kind of tell, okay, this is a Friday night, my friend Jack is doing this, my friend Sam is doing this, I'm doing this, I have this required thing to do. And then the monetization comes into the fact that you can have event promoters, you can have entertainers for these kind of people, like promote, set up events on social account, and depending on some sort of commission level, they can take get some sort of permission on when that event will show up on some sort of feed. So there's kind of like a discrepancy between, okay, well, this is spam and this is kind of the event that you want to go to, but that's, they're learning how to do that.
To build on that really quickly, I think instead of using, for example, like targeted ads, our ad would be like, not ads, but they'd actually be like events which you have expressed interest in. It's sort of a stumble upon system where you select areas that like, oh, like I like, this sort of dance music, like this sort of band, and then it'll suggest events based on your initial input, and then learn as you like accept or decline those events.
Cool. So what should these guys do for the next 6 weeks?
Oh, geez.
What do you want to see at the end of the semester when you come back and see progress?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I dig the direction. I can point to anything specific and say it won't work because of this. So the question is like, what is the most risky part of the pitch? And then like, what can you do to de-risk that part? Like from a mindset of failing fast, right? Like if your startup idea isn't going to work, you want it to not work as quickly as possible. And so if your biggest problem is maybe like getting users or, I guess getting users probably. So like, I don't know, like could you, I've never used Doodle before, I've heard about it. Like would it be easy just to clone Doodle? Could you like clone Doodle and basically try to start to get users and at the same time try to add features on top of it?
Yeah, I think from a user acquisition standpoint, somebody actually mentioned it, and this was kind of what we were thinking. When you create an event and like invite people to come, it's a very short step to say you get an email that says, oh, do you want to do our team meeting now? And you click yes, and then you log in, type in your Google information, and you're on the site, your user.
I think the aggregation of events across platforms. Like 5 years ago, I definitely would not have, and like now that stuff worked. But like I think users have started to kind of grok the idea that like web services can talk to web services like on your behalf, and it's starting to get kind of interesting. It's an interesting space.
I think it just so happens that everybody uses calendar, everybody uses Facebook, so it's kind of like, maybe an alternate universe, something we're talking about where there's like one huge global calendarization.
Well, that's also like what we're doing at Zobme. It's like one huge address book, basically. And it's like everyone you've ever contacted, whether it's through LinkedIn, Facebook, on email, versus text message, whatever. It's like TBD whether or not that will work. But I think it's a decent product strategy.
Yeah, I guess moving forward, does anybody have any,
Well, we have to move on.
Like,
We have like another phone call, scheduled.
Okay.
But did you have,
Just one thing to consider is that not everybody uses Gmail. I know everybody at MIT uses Gmail, but definitely keep that in mind. The majority of your customers are going to come from everywhere else, and not everybody uses Gmail. Not everybody uses a calendar system. So how do you get people who weren't using one to use one?
Yeah.
cool. I don't know. Can I get these guys up here? Team RFID? You guys here? So you guys, come on down. All right, you guys want the pitch, because I already told Gerald your pitch. I'll give your pitch for you basically, really quickly. So basically, Parkinson's disease, the hope is that you can detect it by selling a kind of electronic device that will have accelerometers built in. It can detect kind of tremors, and then that way you can measure efficacy of various drug treatment or whatever deterioration or improvement over time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I have a friend who's running a startup basically, and he's been working on it for about a year. And his is also a low-end consumer-focused medical device. So basically his is like a stethoscope and like ECG or EKG or ECG, I think, that can talk over Bluetooth to your iPhone or iPad. And your doctor can like see your heartbeat basically without even coming in. So anyway, it says it'll be interesting to see. This is like a totally new space, and no one knows what's going to work yet. So let's see. This is my friend Gerald, who is running that company. Why can't I do video? Yeah, it's weird, right? I was doing video earlier today. Maybe it's the resolution.
Is having the external
There's
monitor
nothing.
maybe use the
Gerald!
What?
Gerald, is this you? Oh, no, this is Justin. Sorry, Justin, wrong number.
Yeah, you just call me back.
Yeah, sorry. Wrong number.
You're to talk to me again.
We love you, dude. Thanks, man. All right, oh, this is nice one. It was a phone number. So Gerald.
What's up?
Yo, yo, how's my hair?
Dude, looks good, man.
Cool.
You see me?
Yeah, you're up on the screen, dude. And here's like a group of all these MIT students.
Yeah. Let's go, guys.
Yo, so
What city is he in?
Gerald's coming from San Francisco. Actually, just moved to San Francisco to join in on the gold rush middle of last year. So Gerald, you know what this company, what this startup is doing. I showed you the slides. I thought maybe it'd just be useful for you to talk about your experience in the space, just kind of broadly, and like maybe 5 minutes or so.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm currently working on a cardiovascular diagnostics platform. Very similar to this Team RFID project. I'm actually building extremely low-cost cardiovascular sensors, a stethoscope and an ECG, and linking them to a software platform. So the end goal is we want to basically allow consumers to be able to Shazam their own heartbeat or ECG. And just because we think that doctors use antiquated tools, and with a little bit of technology, you can actually build a much, much better diagnostics platform. So we're focused primarily on just stethoscope and ECG in the cardiovascular space. And yeah, but we've been working on this project for about 1.5 years, completely bootstrapped. And there's not many people that are kind of focusing on this clinically relevant health space. I think it's a really hot area. I think that there's obviously a lot of room for improvement. And I encourage people that are looking at the space to to continue trying to innovate in it, because it's a space filled with very old school incumbents, and it's a place that's ripe for innovation.
What do you think the major challenges are? Or what are the major challenges?
Well, so I think the biggest thing is just kind of understanding where the need is, right? Because you're friends with Drew, and when he was building Dropbox, I mean, he left his USB disk in California, he was on a consulting gig in New York, and I mean, he had that problem, and he knew how to solve it, and he knew where the pain points were. Unfortunately, for a lot of this health stuff, the reason it's innovated on by doctors primarily, is because they just understand the need there. If, for instance, if I had type 1 diabetes and I wanted to build a glucose monitoring company, it would be very tough for me to understand where the pain points are if I didn't have diabetes. However, if I did have diabetes, it would be very hard for me to start a startup because my healthcare costs would be insane, and so there is definitely a little bit of a gap in basically knowing where the need is and knowing how to innovate on it. Once you pass that part, it's a fairly regulated industry. Do you want me to talk specifically about this business plan, Adam?
Yeah, can you give like 15 seconds to FDA approval, 15 seconds to and then like maybe a minute about like distribution and like kind of what you learned about getting doctors to selling to doctors or selling through doctors versus selling direct to consumer and so on, and like the billing codes and everything else.
Okay, sure. So I guess the biggest thing with regulated devices that most investors are scared of today is the need for FDA approval. Basically any device or software that's meant to treat disease or monitor disease is monitored by the FDA. Even if you say explicitly that it's only for consumer use, the FDA is still going to be on you because they've been looking at this ecosystem very, very closely. And so essentially for most of these devices, the way to get FDA approval, there's two processes. There's a 510K path, and then there's a PMA path. A 510K path is essentially a 90-day approval process, which you submit your device or software with test data that shows it's comparable to other devices and software that have been FDA approved or 510K cleared in the past. And so that's a fairly straightforward process, but unfortunately FDA consultants cost more than lawyers. The second thing is that the PMA process. The PMA process is really devices that are new to the market, that don't really have any predicates on the market that's FDA approved, that basically offer something comparable in functionality. And that process takes several years and millions of dollars of clinical research to do. So once you figure out the FDA process, the second thing that comes into play it's a really big barrier is reimbursement. So, today consumers don't really pay out of pocket for anything, right? Everything is reimbursed. Everything has a CPT or billing code. And basically for any type of exam or anything the doctor does for you, he gets paid for it. And so the way to get reimbursement is to understand if there's billing codes in existence that you can leverage to pay for the diagnostics of your device, or to lobby for new billing codes. So reimbursement is generally a big issue because the biggest thing is consumers just aren't used to paying for anything else. So you really have to answer the question, who pays?
So how much does it, like, what are the table stakes for like building your startup? Like how much money do you need to basically, kind of get the ball rolling, or to, or not?
So, proof of concept is, it's fairly slim in terms of how much money that you need. But in order to really get doctors and the people that matter to take notice of what you're doing, you really need a set of clinical trials. Clinical trials generally, depending on how many patients you need for your study, would probably cost about $1,000 per patient. That's very, very ballpark. And so, but honestly, like for something like the chemo ID thing, you don't need a ton of patient data, right? I mean, 100 data points is, I think it's a good enough study. But something like that's about $100K, and then that's not including the cost of your device. And also, if you want to get your FDA approval, you have to build everything under an active quality system, which are basically, it's basically, have you guys ever dealt with HIPAA before? No?
HIPAA, probably not. No.
Okay, well HIPAA is basically a checklist that essentially says that you can't store patient data and patients' names in the same database, and there's like a checklist of other things that you have to do to be HIPAA compliant. Well, when you're building med devices, you have to build it under an active quality system, which is essentially another checklist provided by the FDA that tracks all of your development, all of your future innovations, and just explains why you made features this way and whether or not they can affect someone. So
basically like $1 million. $1 million in like 2 years.
$1 million in 2 years, and just like very, I mean, you need to do research on this stuff. It's not really easy to just build. You have to kind of build with systems in place that allow you to have a quality system launched when you develop this stuff. So it is fairly regulated, but yeah, I think $1 million is on the low end. I mean, that's kind of how much that we're looking to raise right now. And we have very simplistic products, but at the same time, we have relationships with hospitals and regulatory consultants.
And how long have you been working on your thing? Like,
well, in total, we've been working about 2 years. It took us about 6 months to really hone in on exactly what kind of devices that we wanted to build. And it took us about another year to understand how to sell these things and who cares about this and what kind of impact it can have clinically. But yeah, you really need to, I mean, it's a long process. But the thing is, once we figure all this stuff out, it's a huge competitive advantage because a lot of guys, they'll go out, they'll build internet companies, and it's all about first to market. Well, here there's a lot of research involved, and it's very hard to accelerate like you can in the internet business.
Got it. What's a good way for them to spend the next 6 weeks if they want to come out of the semester with a clear understanding of whether they should go forward with this kind of thing?
Did you get that?
Yes. Honestly, for something like this, are you talking about something like this in specific?
Yeah, so you saw their device, right? Basically like monitoring Parkinson's disease based on accelerometer data, which is indicative of the tremors. And so thus being able to measure the efficacy, or lack thereof, of various treatments or time.
Right, so if I had 6 weeks to push this forward, I would spend those 6 weeks talking to physicians and doing research to see what are comparables on the market right now. You want comparables because it's just easier to get into the FDA process that way, and you just want to know how physicians are going to clinically integrate this and what they're interested in seeing, what kind of data they want from this. I mean, that's, the physicians are customers, or rather, they're the physicians or your sales force for the customers. So it's really important that they want to use this as well.
Cool. Good, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool. Is that everything?
I think so.
Awesome. Well,
We did
have a
great.
good time out there.
Come on. See ya.
Okay.
Bye.
Be easy.
Cool.
Do we have these contact details here?
Yeah, sure. Cool. All right, you guys are at the Husky.
All right.
Thanks. All right, so do you have that file that you put together with all the slides? Like,
Yeah, I shot that over.
no, I can look it up. Why don't we give these guys, get these bombers up here, and we can maybe, with extra time, we can do Q&A or go through other startup slides, whichever you guys decide.
Yeah, you may have noticed some suspicious looking characters hanging out in the room over here.
Yeah.
So why don't you come up and tell them what you're up to?
Cool. Welcome to Inky Bombers.
Hey guys, this is Ilya, I'm Peter, this is Erica, and this is Calvin. And we're all part of something called the Inky Bomber, which is something we invented a month or two ago, and we're super excited about the projects that we've been working on there. So we came here to show them to you guys. We have a couple demos, and we're a lot less experienced than Adam, but we built a lot of stuff, so we want to show it off.
So our other background reason we're here is 3 of us were in this class last semester. And three of us were a team for the first half, and we have the same structure now, and then of course on the second half.
Great. Anyway, so we have 2 products. We're kind of starting off. It's immediately not a good idea. And we know that. We're going to do something about that. But yeah, so I guess some background is we took this class, and then we kind of, studying making startups in your dorm room is kind of hard because basically you're studying all day and then you just want to get out, you want to go do something else, and so it's hard to get back there and kind of like concentrate. Like, at least I believe in like the setting where you work is should be, enjoyable. Probably should, it's kind of hard to work where you sleep next to your bed and things like that. So Peter basically converted his room into a bunch of tables with a bunch of computers on them, so we just sit and we code there. So yeah, we just really like prototyping things, and we think it's important. So like, basically, it's way easier for someone to take you seriously when you're like, check this out, and then you just show them, and they're like, holy crap, it's there, And even if it's buggy, or, you shouldn't launch it early, but even if it's a little bit buggy, at least you have something to show up. Anyway, are we doing anything first?
Yeah.
Okay, so, just like talk about it. Oh my God, what's happening? See? Wow. Okay,
You can lower the taskbar to be shorter.
Okay, so EtherTunes is a social collaborative playlist. So the idea is people like to listen to music together. And so you basically go to their site, you instantaneously get a playlist, you add music to it, then you send the link to your friends over IM, email, Facebook, anything else, and they immediately pop up here, and you see their face. So do we have another computer we can send this to?
Okay, so, what...
Peter, I am to someone else so that they can see the class.
What we'll show you is if you share the list, so I can basically join the same playlist. Then on my computer, I can add songs, and he immediately see them show up. I can remove songs, etc.
Show this in your Facebook wall?
That's pretty cool.
Where are these songs playing from? Your iTunes?
YouTube.
So right now we're starting from YouTube,
Yeah.
but it's really just like a bootstrapping mechanism because we don't have any other legal data.
So there isn't a sign up, you don't have to create an account.
No, correct.
That's like awesome.
Yeah, so we actually launched, so we went to South by Southwest to launch this, which really was like more of a demo. But we ended up sort of accidentally launching a little bit, and it almost went viral yesterday, but I think we're okay, because we're not ready for that. But yeah, people started sharing it on their Facebook walls. You have all these mechanisms to make it like very easy for people to share, and it's like naturally a social thing. Right?
That's awesome. Is it in Flash or HTML5?
So right now it's based on Flash. Eventually, we want to move to using like HTML5 audio, maybe draw from like the RDO API.
The whole thing is in Flash. That whole canvas is in Flash.
No. Everything else is in HTML5 and JavaScript.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's completely falls apart.
Any questions about this particular product? Any thoughts?
Any monetizing?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's like definitely a lot of ways we can go, and it's really important to understand these ways, and that's kind of what we're working on. Did a really good job talking about South and Southwest with people. So the idea is, our original idea was subscription model. You get a lot of cool things. So the really exciting part about this, which I like engineering-wise is very exciting, is that we're building the social music graph. So for example, I invite you to my playlist, and you add a lot of songs to my playlist, and I spend a lot of time listening to your music. Well, maybe we have equivalent equivalent music taste, right? So maybe instead of Pandora recommending these songs based on the quality of the songs, maybe I just want to listen to your songs because we have similar music tastes. And plus, when I see your little picture there that says, this person recommended this song, I get a lot more excited. And so, like, that's kind of the thesis behind this. Like, Adam had a thesis behind Zobnia. We had 1, 2 here. So basically, like, listening to music with friends is really, really exciting. Like, if I see your picture and I see you listening to one of these songs, I get really excited about it. And I want to drag you somewhere else and be like, listen to this solo. So that's kind of like what we're going for here. And so we hope to later provide better recommendations of music based on your friends and your social network on Facebook. How I think now we're going to monetize it is you're going to go to e4tune/Snoop Dogg and you're going to see what Snoop Dogg is listening to, and then Snoop Dogg will be drinking the Coke, and then Coke is going to pay us money. And that's my goal. Or you're going to go to /South by Southwest, and it's going to be the official South by Southwest playlist. So that's where I think we're going now.
Monetization is hard in music.
Yeah.
Like, notoriously hard. You also don't have to like make this into a company. It can also just be something cool you build. Or it can also just be like a cash flow business rather than like, a company where you're trying to make it into like, worth 9 or 10 figures.
Yep. And the other obvious thing is there's a lot of competitors, right? So it's red water, as Evan will say.
Yeah.
It's a tough business to be in.
Yeah, it can also be interesting. Like this could be, especially if this like goes viral, it could be an interesting, simple, like small acquisition by, just a couple $1 million, which is like good money, to like Pandora or who went public and recently has acquisition capital now, or is trying to go public. Or British Shark or whatever.
For Apple, what they spend on paying would sort of a mess.
Yeah.
Just you went quickly over the Incubomber thing. So just Incubomber is the structure through which you create companies, and this is one of the companies you're creating. Is that a paraphrase? Is that the way to summarize it?
Yes.
I guess so. I mean, so actually, Adam knows. He hung out with us over IQ, which was pretty cool. Basically, the idea is just like if we're all working together, we just kind of want a dedicated space for that. We might actually expand what we do to actually kind of be more active on the transfer of remote entrepreneurship with things new like a hackathon in the future. So far, it's really just been like a place where people are welcome to come by, talk about ideas, hack on stuff for a while. And so there's lots of visitors coming through, just kind of want to chat and stuff.
And if these people wanted to stop it, how and when would they do that?
You would email incubomber@mit.edu and they would respond to you.
So where?
Yeah, what was that? Incubomber, so I think I'll write it up.
Yeah, right on the board. Why don't you guys show the other demo really quick, and then depending on how much time you have, we can do Q&A with you guys.
There we go. So I'm using a different computer to show that I'm collaborating on another playlist. See that? So I'm not using the projector computer. You can see where I'm listening to the playlist. Anyway, so this is where it gets fun. There we go. Let's show it.
Yeah, so this is sort of a red water startup. It's like a very crowded field, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of these ideas. And the other project we're working on is sort of much slower pace, much more in like Adam's vein of attacking the startup, which is we identified like a really, really big problem in an industry that's really, really messed up. And that industry is education. And the technology sector of education is really messed up. There's this big company called Blackboard that basically buys up all little startups and destroys them and keeps selling their main flagship product, which all students hate as far as I can tell. And so this is a really big problem. We want to do something about this and really disrupt it.
How many people like Stellar, by the way?
Yeah, the Blackboard was like Stellar, but apparently even worse. Just to give you a sense.
This is an open source project
improve this already.
Yeah, there's a number of things like Blackboard. So Blackboard is particularly like a learning management system. Right? And so we want to do something a little bit different, which is it's difficult if you're a professor to really understand how your students may be having a difficult time, where they may be running into problems, all that kind of thing. Right? So basically the idea here is professors upload the course materials like a course management system, except instead of just the students using it, the professor actually gets a lot of information back about how the students are using it. So for example, if you hit the menu step, so if this was a document professor uploaded, they could see it's pretty low level of usage, but the professor could see how the students were actually spending time on the document. They could see it broken down. Okay, they spent most of the time doing homework on page 1, and they also did some test prep on page 1. But for some reason, no one's ever read past page 1. Right? What's up with that? Maybe I should tell them in class, by the way, there's something really important for the PSET on page 4. Right? And this is data that no professor has right now. They can't teach around this. They can't modify the teaching strategy to handle this. So what we're really trying to do is basically get data from how students actually learn at home and bring that back to the professor in a way that helps them develop a relationship with the student and improve the entire education experience. Sweet.
And yeah, as Ilya was trying to show, but pebbles around that also are tools to help students, but it's not, do this in the next slide for kids. The idea is that through comments on the side of the notes, you can ask your fellow students questions, and through a chat interface, you can basically find out who else is working at 3 a.m. than you are, and ask them questions.
Correct. So basically the goal is we're collecting the way students look through these through the documents, and so we can come back and give professors cool things like, a lot of people spend a really long time looking at this graphic, and maybe that graphic needs to be improved.
What are you doing about textbooks?
So that's an interesting question. We basically discovered through some research and talking to a lot of people at Cal Edison that the textbook industry is completely off in their own world, and they don't really want to innovate. So right now we're trying this approach where basically professors at MIT have course materials. Right? They write their own course notes. There's professors in MIT who have 1,400-page course notes. Right? So what we want to do is get them in the process early, where they upload all the course notes and basically build up this library of course materials, so that we just basically make textbooks available.
This is like classic innovator's dilemma, right? Like the old incumbent basically owns like the high end of the market, and they're not interested in the low end of the market because there are no immediate economics for them, and the market for it is very small. And then a new entrant comes in and captures the low end of the market, and over time basically floods out the top end of the market. Because better technology comes around, hard disk is cheaper. Just all these trends happening. We're all becoming more and more connected, and then you can parlay kind of an existing user base into kind of going up market. And then suddenly you have a lower cost basis, you have arts and minds and everything else. It's like Clay Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma is the name of the book that basically describes this dynamic. And some of the classic case studies are in the hard drive industry. This has happened over and over and over again with every new generation of hard disk technology.
Is this something you're trying to get beyond just MIT?
Yeah.
Eventually, yeah. So we just started working on it in January. So we're in the very earliest stages of piloting. So we have 3 people, professors and instructors at MIT who are using it right now. And we're hoping maybe by next fall we'll be moving beyond. But
well, just one thing is most of my friends, I come from Florida, so most of my friends go Florida State, University of Florida. They don't really use systems like this. Most of the things are all just handouts given out in class, and if you went to class, you get the handout, you didn't, you don't. So how do you get professors that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s to adopt your new technology, start using computers, start getting more interactive and stuff like that?
I mean, there are parts of the market that we won't capture now. But the point is that all the trends are going in the right direction. So in 10 years, those professors will retire.
It's also definitely a reasonable question, will this pop now or will it pop in 2020 or will it pop in 2030? And how much does it matter for students getting these iPad devices and their whatever, blah 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 blah. It's just an unknown, it's a question mark, definitely risk.
So it may be that the market's not ready, but we think it's.
There's also a conversation about mentoring that might be nice segueing into, because Eric and I had a conversation where apparently you were inundated by people at South by Southwest who wanted to offer advice, and you were kind of trying to figure out who you should tell what to and on what basis you should engage with people, which I think is an interesting problem to have. I don't know if you want to say more in front of the class about that.
So I guess But this is kind of the point that I guess we're talking about, like, I don't think it yet, but I think one of the things that Inky Bomber and, well, these people who know Inky Bomber have done really well at is actually building stuff. Besides class, he's very good at kind of being able to have the ideas. If you want to go out there, having any sort of a demo basically just really changes how you work, because you figure out what works and what doesn't, and you're going to show people and people respond to it. So as Peter was mentioning, kind of what Southwest, so they're like, oh, we're going to launch your demo, EVTs or whatnot. And so it's basically like, go out there, start building stuff, because you get a lot of feedback from that process. Part of that feedback is that people get really excited about it. And obviously going to want to help you. And advisors are like one of the most important things. We're actually about to start a big search for additional advisors. Because having people, especially since we're all so new at this, having people who kind of know what's going on and have that advice so that for every question, you don't have to look it up from scratch is super useful. But it's also hard because you often don't know these people very well at the beginning. You have to figure out like who has my best intentions, or who has the best intentions like for us or for me or whatever.
So we should probably tell like a little bit of an anecdotal story about this. So
you're like reacting.
Through an advisor that we really like 100% trust, we met these two guys who are like sales and marketing guys, right? And they're like got super instantly excited about when they saw EasyTunes. They're just like, wow, this is super awesome.
Can I take this from the beginning? So at first they weren't so excited. We were like, we met them and they're like, yeah, I have a lot going on. They were like talking about what they have going on. And then we met them again the next day. Like, yeah, we just met with, Union Square Ventures or whatever. And we talked to the guy about you guys, but like, you guys really need traction. You need traction. And before you need traction, the guy probably won't want to talk to you. But I haven't seen your demo yet. So later we met in the coffee shop and we showed him the demo. Instantaneously, he's like digging his claws into us, basically. It was incredible. He's like, hey, tomorrow I'm going to get this Airbnb room and I'll book it and it'll have all these whiteboards all around so we can brainstorm. And his friend is standing by him, just like shaking his hand, and then he's like putting his hand around his friend. He's like, all of us will do this together. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting exercise, and like two people who got super duper excited about it and were driving our excitement forward, but at the same time we're really nervous about them like trying to hijack our vision.
They want to have sex on the first day.
Yeah.
I just called our advisor and like his exact words were like, don't get in bed. In quotes, don't worry. But, go on.
I mean, but it really got to the point where, like, he was driving us, like, to such extent we, like, went to a power plant party, like, got through the VIP line, like, we never could have done that before. And we ended up, like, getting up into the VIP lounge, and we even ended up, like, backstage. I mean, we, like, pitched our idea to Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore. I mean, like,
all because of this
totally absurd experience.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine the, like, excitement and fervor around this, and these are, like, sales guys who are like, yeah, we want to work with you, and, like, at that point, you're like so impressionable, right? Like, how do you like slow these guys down? And,
did Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore like it?
So we got into his pocket, and he hasn't even held us back.
But apparently, this guy is in contact with his representative. Is what we hear. Which guy is this? The Vimeo party, the band power plant party.
The two guys.
Oh, the two guys,
Bloomer and Bobby.
Their name's not Wigglebots, is it?
No, but the thing is, honestly, there was like 2 days there that we were basically just like living the social network with each other, like, this is going to be one strange ass movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the thing about takeaways are, we had this very long, discussion in good Hollywood fashion.
And there are a lot of trolls out there who want to jump on top of what you're doing.
Basically the point is, number one, have the demo signatures, pull people excited. That part is all good, right? But then you just have to always be very cautious of what is your idea, what is your goal, and make sure that you kind of keep that really pure. And don't let hype kind of change where you go, right? Because it's really easy to be like, this is exciting. You're like, Ashton Kutcher, blah, blah, yeah, should we do what he says? Well, whatever his vision is might not be yours. It might actually sidetrack you from what you really want, right? If you don't yet have a goal user or know how your product works, how can you know if Ashton Kutcher is helpful or just kind of a shiny guy who's excited?
Yeah, we've also spoken of the power of serendipity and random
Sure,
meetings.
right.
And it might just be, this is the perfect opportunity, and you have to jump on the opportunity. And there are a lot of people who just want to sell you shit too, like lawyers or accountants or recruiters, that they see a hot startup coming up and they've got some sort of business on the side that they see you as customers for.
Yeah, there's like the Mark Zuckerberg quote, like, I guess everyone, whenever you're having success, everyone wants a piece of it. More similar. The main reason I want you guys to see these demos, and definitely the point is like building shit is a huge wind at your back. And also like, the other thing that's just like very strong under your back is the sense of excitement and camaraderie and adventure that these guys have, you know, which like really powers. Is like if you like take everything in the opposite extreme, right? Like if you're not excited, you're like working alone and whatever, you're just not gonna have like the motivation or the like, you know, kind of mutual encouragement to build this stuff. Or like the sense of adventure to do like the startup bus to like drive out to South by Southwest, like without a ticket and like see what kind of like crazy adventures you can get into. And I just really love that spirit. You know, I think that's like the best of the best when it comes to what's great about Silicon Valley and startups. So that's just like a good vibe to experience. So we have, it's 8:40, we're supposed to end.
You wrote a bunch of stuff on the Blackboard, you got through your list.
Yeah, so are we supposed to end at 8:50 or 9 o'clock?
Well, officially 9 o'clock, we like to wrap up by 8:50 to give people some Q&A time, but if people are having fun and want to stay, maybe
So,
5 to 9, let people leave if they want to, and if people want to stay, keep talking.
We got people closing comments there.
So what we can do is we were also talking about going out like somewhere, just get some drinks or, you know, whatever. Under 21 would be good too. We'll find some place to do that for St. Patrick's Day and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
But like after I spoke last semester, these guys drive me back to their dorm room and we like had beers, which is awesome. So yeah, sit back there, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's 8:40, we can just let's just spend the next 10 or 15 minutes doing Q&A and we'll play by ear. And then afterwards we can stick around and do whatever. So here's these are just some topics, and like also from the sheets that we handed out, of just different things I could elaborate about. Or you can ask me anything you want. There you go.
I was actually curious to hear what you have on a geographical front, because you also have on the other side the other idea that you have to input on mobile location sharing. And I was just curious what you thought of it in general. So I've seen that's kind of the buzzword too, but I don't see how it's actually being implemented in a positive way.
Yeah, so my original intent behind geographical trends was really like geographical trends for startups. So like, basically Boston is on its way down, like for better or worse. San Francisco is like hugely on its way up. And like even within San Francisco, most startups used to tend to have been in the South Bay, like Mountain View, San Jose, Palo Alto. And like more and more and more, like everyone is like moving up to San Francisco, the city. Like Twitter is in the city, Zynga is in the city, like, et cetera, et cetera. What's that?
Dropbox.
Dropbox is in the city, yeah, I mean, totally. And I think that's also like, you could espouse on like why that's true, but this is like the geographical trend nature of it. And then like New York is also more and more like kind of getting momentum. But in terms of like mobile location sharing and like GPS and mobile location, so I was originally just kind of thinking about the space, and then Facebook came out with Facebook Places, I think is what it's called, where you can check into places. And then I thought, oh boy, well they just basically like killed, Foursquare and all these guys. Or at least they disintermediated Foursquare, right? It's like the central database of location check-ins. But like it hasn't really hit mainstream, and I don't know why. I think one thing that might be coming that might make it more mainstream is like kind of local commerce meets like these GPS check-ins. So people are just now trying to do this kind of stuff where it's basically like Groupon meets like, flash coupons meets like check-in, like loyalty programs and all this kind of stuff. So like if one of my friends is like working on an idea which is, if you're like a nail place or something, and you have like extra inventory, like basically people who are there and they're not being, like no one's, customers. And so basically like why not offer a special at that time to fill in the empty slots, and so on and so on and so on. I think that stuff is kind of interesting. Like Foursquare is definitely trying to go in that direction because they've kind of been disintermediated from a network effect, not just like the data standpoint. And we'll see where that goes. The problem with local stuff is that you need like large sales forces to to be able to basically hit the streets, you know, make these like calls and do these sales. So local sales is very expensive, and that's also like the business that Yelp is in, right? So Yelp is trying to do monetization more and more around these kinds of deals. In fact, like recently, this last week, I started to just get like a lot of emails from them. It's like, you know, the one I got today was like limo pickup from the airport for like $68 instead of $130 or whatever. And so like Yelp is trying to come in from like their social, you know, review side. Groupon is trying to come in with like kind of more location-aware GPS. And then Facebook is just trying to do the social side. And then Google is also like, I think, kind of one of the big question marks in this space. So it's definitely like an interesting kind of thing. But no one's exactly figured it out yet.
How do like your ideas evolve within the group of people? How did they, you know, was there like one person that was like an idea like generator and everyone else kind of got on board, the idea was generally good and kind of honed and shifted and directed funnel? Like, could you talk about a little bit how that process works?
The idea process kind of vis-a-vis the group.
Like, if it's a good thing that's initially like exposed to sit down and come up with like, oh, I think this is really interesting. Propose it to the rest of the group, and kind of sit around and like work on it. If it's a good idea, like the group kind of catching on board, they see the vision and it kind of starts to take off that way, or is it everybody's own interests and experiences, knowledge come into play and kind of twisted into something that everyone can agree with?
I think it unfolds in different ways for different startups. For Zobme, I had the original idea, and I raised the money from my combinator, and then I basically like called around trying to find like a friend who was like crazy enough to join me, and you know, that's how that unfolded. With Dropbox, it was basically the same thing. Like, Drew also applied as a co-founder, and I think my combinator condition is acceptance on being able to find a co-founder. You know, but other times, you know, like PayPal, you know, they had the original idea, and then there was just like the market was pulled them in that direction, right? So they were in an adjacent market, adjacent business, same thing as Groupon, right? But the market was pulled them in another direction after the team was already put together. My process for like this time around was basically, and it's still just me. My process was basically come up with an idea and then put the team together around it. You know, and especially in my case, the idea is so technical that you want a different team mix, basically. You know, whereas like with Justin.tv or like, you know, if you're Airbnb or whatever, like the technical stuff isn't really super challenging. And so it makes sense to have like more kind of marketing firepower, business operations firepower on the founding team versus something like, in my case, it's all technical. Yeah, so they're also just like those dynamics. And I'd say like it could work in either way. You know, and these guys, what about you guys? How was EtherTunes one person's pretty good idea? So it was your idea, and then you got those guys to work on it?
I basically like implemented a demo of it, just like by myself, and then these guys were quite on board, and then I basically convinced Peter to help me make it further in a hackathon, and then all the judges tweeted about it, and then Peter was convinced, and then basically like the rest of the team also liked it. So
yeah, it's great. Cool.
So almost continuing on from that, once you have, especially in a startup, once you have either some people that are willing to work with you, a lot of times I am guessing that the sentiment's kind of, let's just do this and see what comes of it. And once you actually get to a level of being more famous or you get investing, is it ever been a problem to be like, okay, you know, how much as the owners, we can say to the VCs, we own 30% or whatever it's going to be, but then from there, how do you split it up and how do you keep that from being a tension point?
That's a good question. I think the clearest way to do it is to decide like kind of a priority, you know. But if you're in the mode of much more like Incubomber, where you're just kind of everyone's kind of floating around and working different projects, different times, and so on, versus something like with like Zobme or Dropbox or my next company, where it's like very much like a deliberate, direct effort. In that case, it's more straightforward. I don't know. How are you guys handling that question? Have you talked about it?
Yeah, I guess you're like the person that has an idea has some value, has some additional value, and then it's what Peter says, like it's how much risk you basically take on. So if like, you know, some person is like working a really long time, spending all this personal time working on it, and then he convinced other people to join on. Like, he was the one that risked a lot right in the beginning because he could fail, and so that's like also worth additional value. And then, but after that, basically we just try to like equalize to make everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware.
Yeah, so like you could say, I've seen in other instances of startups where basically the person came with the idea and maybe did the early work, said, okay, that was worth, 20% or like whatever it might be, X. And then we'll divide like the 1 minus X remainder up, in proportion to our relative skills or like how much time we're working on it in relation to each other and so on. And like at the end of the day, you have to be sure you're working with people who, are just like reasonable and you have like good, that's like just yet another reason why it's important to work with people who you trust and have like a nice working relationship with. Anyone else? Thanks for being troopers. Like I know it's late, spring break. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so I didn't know South by Southwest was a good time to launch startups. Is that?
I think it's a horrible time to launch startups. In fact, Drew, I'm like quoting Drew verbatim. We were like walking through South by Southwest, and Drew said, South by Southwest is such a horrible place to launch a startup.
So what makes something a good or a horrible place to launch a startup?
Well, the problem with, of course, Twitter, launched at South by Southwest. There are a couple of interesting characteristics of South by Southwest that can make it an advantageous place to launch, particularly if your product has network effects and you need some kind of critical mass, and or if it's great for social coordination, right? So Twitter and Foursquare are probably the best examples of companies that launched at South by Southwest and went on to achieve some kind of status, And those are just great, right? Because if you're trying to launch in San Francisco and you're doing Foursquare, it's just not as interesting as being able to launch the app and see where all your friends are. And by the way, you're being social whenever you're not sleeping at South by Southwest, so you're constantly checking it. And you really want those push notifications, because that's what you're doing. Versus if you didn't launch at South by Southwest, then it's less useful. And so I'd say for the limited class of startups and products like that, another one was a group texting product that came out called the Loop this year. That was kind of interesting and fun. But generally speaking, if you're doing something like Etherpad, the signal to noise ratio is just so low. In other words, in aggregate, companies and startups probably spend, I'd say at least $1 million, possibly $10 million on marketing, in that that 20-block area for 3 days or 4 days. And so, the probability that you'll be able to do something that's really interesting is, especially going down over time. South by Southwest has grown 30 to 40% in the past 2 years. Gerald, the guy that we were on the Skype with, the video Skype earlier, he used to work at Rackspace, and he did their South by Southwest marketing 3 years ago. He got a guy to dress up as a gorilla, and they gave out free Jungle-esque accounts with dollar bills attached to these little things or whatever. Anyways, hugely successful. So also creative and kind of guerrilla marketing kind of stuff. Even if it's not literal, can be more. You can differentiate that way, right? You're not some big formal corporate or whatever. So keep it fun too. It's another tactical thing. But South by Southwest is great. It's just spring break for Silicon Valley, basically. I was up. The first night I was up until 4:30. The second night I went to sleep at 7 a.m. and then 4 a.m. the next night. And I was just paying for it through this morning. And it was, but I'm with it now. So.
It's pretty incredible. We were doing our research into our competitors during South by Southwest. And it was every day there was a new competitor directly in our field being released.
What's your field?
Just social commerce.
Oh, the social commerce. Yeah, totally. Scan.org was the one that I actually was hanging out with those guys at South by Southwest. I heard their name mentioned by 2 or 3 people while I was there.
So I'm just kind of curious how you guys actually ended up almost going viral, because yesterday morning I was in the Starbucks next to Apple, and the person I was sitting next to at the giant wooden table was on Etherpad.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't know what it was, and it was funny because he was talking about, I think he was actually talking about setting up an incubator either in Boston or New York. And I probably would have talked to him if he hadn't been on the phone the entire 4 hours that I was there. But he was talking and listening to Etherpad at the same time. And I was so it was just really kind of weird for me to all of a sudden see it come up here, and I was like, oh my god, I felt
Yeah, was he African American with no hair?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually our advisor for Bookstore.
There we go.
That was the friend of, that was the guy who introduced us to those Bobby and.
Small world, man, because, I was sitting next to him. I was
He's actually the perfect example of an awesome advisor, because despite the fact that we have given him absolutely nothing, he goes to extreme lengths to help us out. So he was testing out ether tunes for 48 hours straight to give us awesome feedback for like no cost, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Paul Graham has an essay called Be Good. It's like about this dynamic, right? Like Alex O'Hanian from Reddit also talks endlessly about this. Like, if you ever meet Alex, he's just like a likable dude, and he has good energy, and you just like want him to be successful, and that can go like a long way in terms of like a skill to acquire, just like a vibe.
I've got another quick question. So it seems like you hang out with a lot of founders. Is Gerald an exception in terms of like a hardware guy, or are there a lot of hardware people that are starting to crop up?
Mostly an exception. And it's coming on the up and up. Actually, like I was meeting with Ron Conway, who's like the most prolific angel investor, and they were talking about this kind of wave of like Fitbit. These like basically it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to create low-end hardware devices. That's like both the accessibility of ODMs in China and like the manufacturers in China and so on. And this is just becoming more and more commoditized. There's also another startup called Upverter, which is kind of cool. They're basically trying to do like open source hardware, and so like you can draw a circuit board and share with friends, or hit like a print, and they'll basically mail you that circuit board, which is like super cool. Like I'm excited about that. But that's more like 5 years ago.
You guys have announcements?
Yeah, we have an announcement. So you guys remember our talk last class about starting kind of the next generation of incubator and thinking about different funding models. And Ken mentioned that we were working on a project of starting a summer startup internship program. And so we're happy to say that we have 7 companies? 7? Yeah, 7 companies committed. And we're looking for engineering students to apply and enter there. They're paid internships. They'd be about 2 months long. We have this URL, that's the application. And so basically like, people like you who are super excited about startups and want to learn what it's like to be in that environment would be excellent candidates. So the list, we have Dropbox, HubSpot,
Post2, Hunch, Talk2, Flight, and Jumo.
And just to be clear, these are existing companies that you would go do an internship with. Last time we were talking about what we could set up that would help you start your own company. So we're envisioning 2 parallel tracks. So you could either go into an existing company or do something to start your own.
This is a thing going back to Adam, me and Adam were talking about this beforehand. If you go on his blog, I'm not sure if you wrote it up somewhere. blog.smith.cc. That's another post kind of that actually is strangely similar to what we were talking about in doing this. So if you're interested, go and look at that as well.
Yeah, and the only catch is that you'll be working with a Stanford student, which we think is awesome because we want to bridge that gap between the coasts. So it'll be an MIT student, Stanford student working together at a startup, getting paid, getting through.
Is this something we should keep within the class, or can we share with friends?
Share with friends,
Okay.
yeah. We have about 50 flyers, but we'll be distributing and posting around campus and stuff, but distribute like this link and tell your friends about startups the start of summer. So, any other questions?
Are they looking for specific skills, like is there a place you can go to see what type of person they're looking for to hire?
They're just looking for awesome people who are talented.
Yeah. I mean, they want engineers, so I mean, you all will qualify. So I guess it'll depend from company to company. And also you'll rate your preferences, so if you're really interested in maybe more social entrepreneurship, like Jumo or like Dropbox, so you'll have to do that in the application too.
What is on that flyer?
The flyer?
It's the endless summer.
It's the endless summer, but it's startup summer.
It's a great move. If you have
Way too highbrow joke for flyer. I can't read from here.
Yeah, well, we'll be. This is an iterative process, so thank you. I apologize for the hard trade test.
So I'll be hanging out, we'll be hanging out, if you guys want to come down, but otherwise have a good weekend.
I'm putting this up here.
Thanks, Adam.